Fish gotta swim and birds gotta fly, but they don't last long if they try. Pollution, pollution, you can use the latest toothpaste and then rinse your mouth with industrial waste. Just go out for a breath of air, and you'll be ready for Medicare. The city streets are really quite a thrill. If the hoods don't get you, the monoxide will. Pollution, pollution, wear a gas mask and a veil. Then you can breathe, long as you don't inhale. Lots of things there that you can drink, but stay away from the kitchen sink. The breakfast garbage that you throw into the bay. They drink at lunch in San Jose. So go to the city, see the crazy people there, like lambs to the slaughter. They're drinking the water and breathing the air. Visit American City, you will find it very pretty. Just two things of which you must beware: don't drink the water and don't breathe the air. Pollution, pollution, they got smog and sewage and mud. Turn on your tap and get hot and cold running crud. See the halibuts and the sturgeons being wiped out by detergents. Fish gotta swim and birds gotta fly, but they don't last long if they try. Pollution, pollution, you can use the latest toothpaste and then rinse your mouth with industrial waste. Just go out for a breath of air, and you'll be ready for Medicare. The city streets are really quite a thrill. If the hoods don't get you, the monoxide will. Pollution, pollution, wear a gas mask and a veil. Then you can breathe, long as you don't inhale. Lots of things there that you can drink, but stay away from the kitchen sink. The breakfast garbage that you throw into the bay. They drink at lunch in San Jose. So go to the city, see the crazy people there, like lambs to the slaughter. They're drinking the water and breathing the air.
Go. All right. Here we have it. So, a beautiful song called Pollution by Tom Lehrer. Hilarious song. Sierra found it recently. I'd never heard it. And we thought this is just so perfect for the show and what we're talking about. Because pollution is what's happening with all of these topics. This is Southwest Florida Water Talks. I'm your host, Eric Crown, and your producer and co-host, Sierra Williams, is here, but not on camera today, but behind the scenes, making sure the show is up and running. This is a series of talks that we wanted to do to talk to everybody in Florida, all around Florida, about the various water quality issues, because all the water connects together. So it's one body of water, ultimately. And the water is like it's like a litmus paper for the environment. And if the water's not doing well, the environment just can't. So this topic is extremely important because Lake O is one of the major pollution issues that residents have been fighting for a long time. I even found a poster from Pete Seeger doing a concert in the 60s to try to stop Lake O discharges, I believe. So, this is an ongoing problem. And the issue is that there's an all-out assault coming from so many different angles that this is it's almost impossible for this one to be fully tamed. So what we need to do is talk about it and discuss how we can stop it, because we think we have a solution and we want to pitch it to everybody and we want to see what you think. Um, Now, the reason that it matters today with Lako, we're going to be talking about a lot of different issues. We're going to be talking about the pollution that comes into it and the pollution it sends back out. Now, Lako itself, well, here we go. Okay, well, actually, to start with, so what we'd like to do is share an amazing fact about this Florida water. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but in 2018, the Florida's toxic algae crisis killed over 2,000 tons of marine life. 2,000 tons of marine life. That's marine life that doesn't come back. Fisheries collapse. Biodiversity collapses when you have this much. What happened? Do you think that Lake O discharges played a part in this toxic puzzle of what happened there? Because these Lake O discharges go east and west and infect the Gulf of Mexico and also infect the areas to the east. We'll get into that a little bit more later. So one thing we'd love to know is, where is your location? We're going to talk about all these water quality issues. What area are you in, and what water quality issues do you see? Would love to know if you have personally seen algae blooms or fish kills in your area. What's going on in your area? Have you had any algae blooms? Have you had any fish kills? And we'd like to put together more of this puzzle created by this toxic puzzle that is Lake O. And Lake O is, in a lot of ways, a perfect symbol of Florida. It's this gorgeous piece of nature that everybody wants to go and participate with. But it's being choked out by industry and greed. And unfortunately, that leads to a lot of the problems that we see overall. Now, this is also causing a lot of problems down as well. And we'll talk a little bit about the Everglades, because the water here is all connected together. And as a matter of fact, here's a map of, and I know a lot of you have seen this before, of a map of what used to happen and how the water used to flow down south into the natural cleaning area, which is the Everglades. And the Everglades is designed to take a lot of these toxins away before the water that has toxins in it, even natural ones and unnatural ones. This gets filtered before the water is returned back to what it used to be called Florida Bay. So maybe that's the new name, Florida Bay. So I wanted to show everybody that, because we wanted to start off today a little bit with a quote. We always like to find good quotes. And this one is from everybody's favorite, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, who says, "If the Everglades is a test, the Everglades is a test. If we pass it, we may get to keep the planet." So far, I'd love to know if you think we're passing or not. Let's take a look here at what we've got going on. And okay, let's put that back up. Again, I'm really curious if everybody remembers the 2018 red tide. And we're going to talk today about how Lake O feeds red tide, and actually is one of the problems that's creating more red tide, but it's never looked at, because a lot of the problems going on there are industry related and pollution related. So therefore, a lot of times they're not going to let us see these types of things. So here we go. I wanted to pop over here really quick. Let's just talk about Lake O for a second. So if we zoom out, I want everybody to see, and I'm sure everybody's very familiar with this. You've got over here, you've got the west side and the east side, and Lake O is right here. Now, Lake O has a lot of these little communities that it has built underneath of this lake, which are not natural. We saw in the previous image that the water is supposed to go down through here. And this is supposed to be land for the water, not land for development. So we have some overdevelopment encroachment issues. And you've got towns like Clewiston which is basically where the U.S. sugar is and other pollutants. So this is Lake Okeechobee. And again, this is the area, and you can see right underneath of it, it would have come down through the Everglades down into that area. But instead, what happened was they decided we are going to build channels and send it to the east and to the west. Now, this creates a whole other sort of problems that we'll get into here in a few minutes. But I wanted to share that with everybody just to get an idea of what Lake O is, where it is, how it's positioned. If you're just visiting Florida and you're not familiar with it, you can check out Captains for Clean Water. You can check out the Water Keepers. They both have amazing amount of information. There's a lot of incredible activists. As a matter of fact, there's a great movie that's going to be coming out made by a friend of ours named Wilson McCourtney. The movie is Fighting for Florida. And this movie covers a lot of these issues that are going on in Lake O. And Lake O is being hounded by multiple types of pollution. And ultimately, as Captains for Clean Water says, you shouldn't even have to deal with Lake Okeechobee discharges. And you can see here, take a look at this. This is, now we got to remember these discharges are pollution. They are pollution. As a matter of fact, I wanted to share with everybody, there's a couple different reasons for the pollution. Let's talk about that real quick. And then we're going to go back into our topic a little bit. But what I wanted to share with everybody is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this or not. This is the Deseret cattle and citrus, and you can see it over here. This is it. It's up here. And whoops, whoa. I didn't even know you could do that. All right. Down here is Lake Okeechobee. And here it is right here. Now what happens is the runoff from their cattle, which includes a lot of fertilizer. And you've got to remember that Mosaic also sells cattle feed from its waste. So you've got feed going into the cattle, and that waste is coming out. That waste is entering your water systems and ending up down in Lake Okeechobee and all points in between. Not to mention that they're using the fertilizer for the citrus, and they're using fertilizer for other aspects on their farm. They are, aside from Mosaic, one of the largest private landowners in Florida, around 300,000 acres, just like Mosaic. But they're a different problem. And if you notice on this map, it doesn't pop out as much as Mosaic's poisoning. But this, interestingly, all Mormon cattle ranch is a major issue. And again, you can see where it bleeds down into Lake Okeechobee. And that's really important because you're getting a lot of fertilizer. Now, aside from that fertilizer, you're getting the fertilizer from everybody's yards. People are using fertilizer. They're trying to make this perfect yard, and it's draining out, and it goes into your drains, and it goes then into your rivers usually. And then those discharges will be sent out to the bay or to the other area. So we have to remember that there is a lot of issues like that happening, where we're getting tons of fertilizer, tons of phosphate. And if everybody remembers from the previous discussion, phosphorus, is a food for red tide. It's called eutrophication. What happens is the red tide basically eats it. It's like miracle grow for red tide. So if you're wondering why 2018 red tides exploded, you can trace that back to the number one, the huge leak that Mosaic had with over 200 million gallons going into the aquifer and then reaching out into the natural bodies of water, taking time, and that eutrophication manifested in 2018. And I'm curious if you guys think it's gotten any better or if it's gotten worse. And hey, Elizabeth, thanks for joining. I see you here joining us today. And I agree with you. Why do humans think they can outsmart Mother Nature? By changing the pattern of the water flow for development, and also for moving people around on the land. We have to consider what happened with the Miccosukee and the Everglades as well. So why, changing the discharge now is putting water that's not supposed to be in these other bodies of water into there. Nature had a plan. We don't. And the moment we start tinkering with it, It's like the butterfly effect, right? Um, Absolutely. So, um, and again, why does this happen? Like, we have to think about this. You've got this lake, it's absorbing all of this fertilizer, all of this runoff. It's got tons of phosphorus. It's going to feed the red tide. Now, your next problem is the runoff and a lot of the other issues from US sugar, which is in the bottom of, let's take a look here. This is in the bottom of the lake. And this here is the beautiful US Sugar Corporation. Now, I'm going to just pull out a second and so everybody can see, get your bearings. Okay, right here. And here's Lake O right here. So here is the US Sugar. Here's Lake O. And here's the town in between it called Clewiston, which should have never been built there because, again, that's where the water was normally going to flow down through here. But as you can see, it's been parceled out for profit. So this use for profit has destroyed the natural water flow. So now you've got US Sugar burning its pollution into the water. You've got the Mormon Cattle Ranch and Citrus Ranch putting their pollution into the water. You have the runoff from all of the towns that this water basin is supposed to try to be supporting, and all this runoff is going into Lake Okeechobee itself. So it's creating a toxic soup that is just festering in there. Now, on top of all of that, what I want to share is we have to remember that due to the diligence of our friend Wilson McCourtney, Scott Wilson, Mike Nepper, there are some amazing Florida advocates that have taught us about the spraying that goes on. There is so much poison being sprayed all around Florida, but especially in Lake Okeechobee. And this is choking out the wildlife. And so now you've got toxic soup, and then they come in and they mix it with more toxic chemicals. So it's a super toxic thing that's really terrible. And please, friends, I'm curious if anybody that goes there fishes in Lake Okeechobee. And if you do fish in Lake Okeechobee, do you eat the fish? Should people be eating fish out of Lake Okeechobee, knowing what we know about all these things? So you used to have Lake Okeechobee, you had this natural flow. Now it's being discharged out to the sides where it is feeding the red tide and turning it into super bloom on the West Coast. Why did this happen? Well, I mean, everybody is very conscious of it. How can this possibly continue? You probably ask yourself. But that would assume that there's an adult in charge. And we have to remember there are no adults in charge. There is money. Look at that brown water. Lake O release ongoing, could last until May. That's just one. I mean, then this is a standard thing. And who decides what's going to happen with the discharges? The Army Corps. They're the ones that are mostly taking control of what's happening, as well as the water management decisions. Now, the Army Corps of Engineers and what is it? South Florida Water Management Decisions Districts. Yes, SWFMUD, as people tend to call it, make decisions that I've seen most people talk about as just being terrible decisions. I have yet to see anybody praise SWFMUD decisions or Army Corps decisions. Now, on that note, really fast, because until we get into what triggers these discharges are so bad that somebody who does take money from the industries we're talking about, Mr. Brian Mast, actually wrote a letter because he stopped the discharges to St. Lucie because that's his area. So he got them to stop doing the discharges. And Brian Mast of Congress in Florida, Republican, says that the EPA has quantified the impacts and determined that the water discharged into our community by the Army Corps was many times too toxic for human contact. Too toxic for human contact. The water coming out of Lake O is often too toxic for human contact. why then are they taking it, putting it out into nature? What's happening? Is it just like a holding tank and then it's a redistribution center of pollution? Because that's not working. And when they talk about red tide and they talk about these groups that are going to this brain trust that's going to fix red tide, as DeSantis promised, zero has happened, and Mosaic's not held responsible, and none of these agricultural companies are held responsible. None of the fertilizer is held responsible. The lifestyle that has been sold and promoted is killing the very place that people come to for that lifestyle that they have been sold and promoted. They want nature, they want fish, they want clean water, and it's not here because people are selling out this state for industry. Now, what triggers this? Why do they even do this? Why can't they somehow put this in other containers? That's not even the question, honestly. The question we're going to get to here is, why is this allowed to happen? We're going to get to some solutions because we think we found a really great solution. And the best part is it's a very simple solution. But what triggers discharges? Rainfall can trigger it, flood risks, sometimes policy of keeping a certain level. So what happens is when the water level rises, they're like, oh, it's going to flood the surrounding towns, which is true. So if you don't do any discharges, the water will rise and flood all these little areas, Clewiston, all these towns that, no offense to people that live there, but should have never been built underneath Lake O. I think most people that live there already know that. But so what happens is, so let's say a rainfall comes in, the water levels come up. Let's say a hurricane. Those happen quite often. The rain down here is amazing, powerful. Sometimes it's every afternoon. So we're talking about a lot of discharges going out. How much? I'd like to know if anybody out there knows. I'm really curious if anybody is on top of that, because I don't know if they publish the proper numbers. And it's true. Elizabeth says it's too toxic for the wildlife contact. So again, anybody that is eating fish from Lake O, please don't. Please don't. Just knowing what we know. Hi, Mary. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you so much. It's great to have you here. This is such an important topic, and it's great to have our community here. If you're like us, like Sierra and I, well, we're lucky because we have each other and we can talk about these topics. But as soon as we're around family, people just are like, oh gosh, should we have to keep talking about this? So all of you advocates out there know this pain of not being able to brain it out together. And this is what we have to do. We have to brain it out together because the people in charge aren't doing that. And the Florida advocates know that for a long time. So how do we do this? What's the balance of flood prevention and environmental damage? How does the rising water levels force these emergency releases? Can that be altered in any way? Is it possible to treat the water before it gets released? Why aren't there heavier treatments going on? Why isn't this thing? Why is Lake O not just a? If it's going to be a repository for pollution, why not make it like a water management thing, where it's just a vat that they clean the water? Because we'd rather have unnaturally clean water than toxic death water. More red tide. So, and Mary says, Mary O'Daniels says, Walton County. Okay. So Mary, I'm curious, what's going on in your water area? What types of events have you seen, or what concerns you? Would love to know more because everybody here is under assault with their health. Look, I have an environmental cancer. I know a lot of people in Florida that have environmental cancers. And a lot of it has to do with this pollution. Florida is selling us out for profit. And Brian Mast even admitted it. Only when it applies to his town, so it doesn't pass the BS test, right? Because it's only for his town. But I mean, come on. If they know it and they're willing to admit it, why Why is this still happening? Well, that comes down to either A, willful ignorance, B, um, potentially money changing hands, corruption, or C, all of the above. It's one of those three. I don't know. What's your vote? I'd love to hear what you think. Is it A, B, or C? So what do we do with this water? This water is so toxic. It's a toxic soup, and it's being discharged, and we are seeing red tide. That is destroying the economy of all of the beachside towns. Now, Florida has a terrible track record of teaching people when red tide's happening, the danger of it. I personally cannot go out to the beaches when it's red tide, and they should make a lot more warning than that. But the problem is they are polluting their tourist attraction, and that leads to a lot of dishonesty from a lot of politicians. And I think a lot of advocates here see it happening in their hometowns and know what's going on. So we got a question for everybody. Do you think water management decisions prioritize people or industries? These decisions that are being made about discharges, do you think those are people prioritized or industry prioritized? I'm really curious to see what you think. Please put your comments in. Let's keep the conversation going here. Now, Sierra brings up the EAA reservoir is supposed to help with scrubbing the water, but it's not enough. It's a band aid for a bullet wound. And that is definitely not going to, that's some patchwork that is never, ever going to give us clean water. So, how do we get clean water? We're going to talk about that in our solutions area. And Elizabeth says, I wish people knew how bad it really was. Everyone that wants to come vacation here has no clue. We had a child paralyzed in Titusville from exposure to pollution. He was simply paddleboarding in a popular area. I just. So Elizabeth votes industry. I personally find that most decisions made in Florida are based on industry, and they're based on who pays the different industry, who pays the different politicians. There was a study done, and Florida was found to be, I think, the second most corrupt state, and maybe past, but either it was trailing behind Louisiana or Texas. But Florida is found to be one of the most corrupt states. So continuing to bring in the same people is not going to work. Look, this is why we're wearing this today. Blue, red. We can't think in this anymore. Okay. Everybody needs to wear both colors in your minds because we have to solve this problem before more people die. Not a joke. Like, this must be fixed. Scott Wilson. Scott, hey, Scott, I'm so glad you're on. Scott is one of my personal environmental heroes. Scott says my mom's live on Little Gasparilla Island and has not been able to leave her home without a full respirator in almost 2 weeks. That is, so many people come down here to retire. So many people down here have immunity issues or health issues. That's why they're here. They're here to have an easy life. They want consistent temperature. They want easy access to, the market, the grocery store, easy access to whatever. Florida has the most amazing gems collected in one place. Like, it's incredible what's down here between, all the different hot springs. You've got the Gulf, which is beautiful. You've got the East Coast, which is gorgeous. You've got the Everglades, which is a mind-blowing place. If you haven't been down there, you've got to go visit. Everybody must see the Everglades. It'll change your full understanding of nature. It blew my mind and changed it forever. It's an amazing place. Every time Sierra and I can go down there, or if we're trying to work our way out to that for any kind of work, we always try to drive through and appreciate it, try to stop, go take a look, because it is a piece of nature you probably really can't find anywhere else that I know of in America. And if you can, please leave a comment, let us know. But as far as I know, there's nothing like the Everglades. And it's in danger because of also not having the natural water flow that it's supposed to have. So there's a lot going on down there as well. And I think, as Sierra says, it's not a game, it's our lives. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely magical place. It's one of the few places you can go to in America where you think, this is, I'm touching the past. I'm touching nature. This is what we all envision. When we all envision nature, we don't envision a park with a bench. We envision a giant open field and huge, skyscapes, and you envision something that's so massive and so much bigger than yourself that gives you a profound solution and understanding to the questions you have inside. That's what nature unlocks so much inside of us. So it's not a man kept thing. And this is the problem here in Florida, is places like Lake O have been controlled through industry, through deals, through shady deals. And by the way, Florida, they're trying to remove the sunshine law, so it could get worse here. So everybody really needs to be focused on what your politicians are doing, your local politicians, your state level politicians. There is a lot, and they are running a lot of angles to ruin the environment. And again, it's not political, but it is political. But our politics should be clean water, and everything else falls to the wayside. So let's start by talking about clean water. That's our commonality. We don't have a difference in that. We all want to see our moms be healthy and go outside. We all want to see our kids go outside, be healthy. We all want to see people not get cancer because of where they live, because industry doesn't care, doesn't even address it. That's the worst part. U.S. Sugar, Mosaic, the cattle ranch farm, nobody acknowledges any problems that they're doing. So how are you going to solve a problem if the polluter doesn't acknowledge they're polluting? And this is where we run into a lot of issues. And you know what? Elizabeth put this up, FloridaRightsCleanWater.org. Sierra and I have gone to some of their meetings. We have the great fortune of doing some screenings with this group. And I can tell you personally, from my perspective, it's the only solution to the problems, because you need protection on the top level, because that's right now where you're getting burned. And only this solution is going to stop it. So go to this website. If you haven't checked it out, go check it out. See what you think. It is extremely powerful. If you have questions, reach out to us, reach out to anybody that is promoting it. When there's a whole bunch of groups, you can reach out to Carl. You can reach out to a couple of us, and we'll answer any questions you have. We don't know the answers, but we can find the person that will, because that might be able to help us save what we have here. Scott says, I've been blessed to spend so much time up Lossman and Shark River in the southern Everglades. Oh, beautiful. Absolutely a bucket list for nature, folks. Oh, beautiful. Yes, bucket list for nature. Absolutely. This is so important. And there's so many activists fighting it right now. They're fighting to keep the water clean. And they've been unified. Florida has some of the most amazing activism. And Elizabeth says, we can't have anything without clean water. That's true. Everything else dies. So let's talk a little bit now about red tide again, because Lake O and red tide are connected and people don't think that they are. Now, are the discharges really to blame for what's happening with red tide? Now, if you talk to people about red tide in Florida, the first thing you'll hear out of everybody's mouth is, well, it's naturally occurring. Yes and no. It is naturally occurring, but historically, until 2018, it has never been this size. It's never been to the size where entire species get wiped out from this. As a matter of fact, it was so bad. What do you remember what year it was? Sierra and I went out to cover red tide. I want to say it was around 2021, 2022. Because unfortunately, since 2018, every red tide is destructive. And there was a really interesting guy on the beach, and he had this worm in his hand, and it was really gross. It was like this flat sea worm. It's about this big, and it was really gross. And we're like, "What are you doing?" Very interesting guy. What's happening? and he said that that's what he does. He studies worms that are under the benthic level, underneath of the seafloor, live in the seafloor, that normally never come to the surface, um, because they are so deep down. But because of the red tide and the hypoxia, these worms died and surfaced. So these biologists had an opportunity for the first time ever to study worms that normally they don't have access to. Now, that is a really messed up situation. And it gives you an idea, because the animals that have the regular life there, they're the first ones to go. You're going to see a lot less of whatever schools of fish were there first. Once that goes, you're going to start seeing less rays. Once that goes, you're going to start seeing less everything. And once you remove one piece of biodiversity, the whole thing crumbles, if not completely falls apart. And we're learning that right now, also with seagrass and the manatees. But that's another show. So there's so much to talk about, right? But again, Lake O, it's this toxic soup loaded with all of this stuff that we know creates extra red tide, and it gets pushed out. Now, again, it comes back to eutrophication, which is the process. We always talk about this, where basically the phosphorus feeds the algae bloom, and it makes a miracle grow and just pushes it out. So it's huge. And so you've got to remember that what happens in Lake O happens in the Gulf. Because everybody now is unfortunately connected where they never would have been before. The waters of the Gulf have their own biodiversity. Now you're importing water that, first of all, has a different salinity, which is automatically adding some strange effects, but also has nutrients that wouldn't be in there otherwise, and pollutants that wouldn't be in there otherwise. So this nutrient load and this pollution load that is creating this toxic puzzle that we can start to piece together is feeding the red tide incredibly. And again, red tide, you've got your big sugar discharges. All of it is going into the perfect miracle grow for your red tide. Now, this is a big problem. Now, you've got to remember Mosaic, even if none of this was happening, Mosaic has a lot of phosphorus that's seeping through into the aquifer, seeping through the limestone, and working its way out to the red tide also. So Mosaic, as an independent player, is already contributing to the bloom. But adding, but by adding these other discharges from Lake O, Big Sugar, all of this is creating a problem. So the people on the West Coast are paying the price for the industries near Lake O. Now, that messes up the whole system, because normally you have to have a city council or a city commissioner not listen to the citizens and allow industry to come in. This is different, because this is allowing waste from one area to be moved where the other area pays the price. People are mad about it with injection wells. Well, guess what? Lake O's been a surface injection well for a long time. And we are seeing those effects on marine life, tourism, and public health. We are seeing the water deteriorate. We are seeing the crazy colors of green algae that are popping up from people's areas. We're seeing the massive amounts of destruction. And it all comes down to selling out for industry. So what do we do? What can we do? Well, we have a big battle ahead of us, but we can do it. We can do it. Big sugar, agriculture is a huge industry out here. I believe it's number 2, aside from number 1 is tourism in Florida. Number 2 is agriculture. And there is big sugar. Mosaic is considered agriculture, even though they're mining. They don't grow anything. They destroy. So I don't see how that's agriculture. But they are considered agriculture. Although zoning wise, they do need industrial. They need mining. So, all right. So sugarcane is one that we wanted to talk about as well, because the phosphorus pollution, sugarcane actually contributes to it because of all of the fertilizers that they use, all of the chemicals they use for it. And then you got to remember they have the big burn off too, which poisons local neighborhoods in a whole other way in the air. And what doesn't poison the neighbors in the air also lands on the water. So you have a lot of issues. You can see the smoke go up, but it doesn't just dissipate in the air. We got to remember it dissipates, but then it comes back down. So everybody that lives around there in like the Clewiston area, especially, there must be a lot of challenges to the health. So be curious to hear from anybody that lives in that area about health, especially like lung issues and other cancer related issues. Excuse me. So Sierra has a great question here. Do you think big sugar, phosphate, and other agricultural industries that release these nutrients should be held responsible for red tide and water pollution? Should they be held responsible? What's corporate responsibility on this? What is the corporate responsibility? And hey, Maria, thank you for joining the show today. Always great to see you on here. And there's so much for us to talk about. There are so many entangled problems out here, but the more we talk about them, the more we can solve them. And that's going to be our key, is just talking about more and more. Exactly. As Elizabeth says, gorillas are naturally occurring, but when a 300-foot tall gorilla shows up, it's an issue. So why does all this happen? You can go to places like opensecrets.org and you can trace your local politician and you can find out if your local politician has taken any money from these industries that are polluting into this bowl of toxic soup. And who's benefiting from these discharges? Well, the polluters are benefiting because they never have to pay for pollution because their pollution is not quantifiable. It's mixed in with all the other pollution and it's discharged into more water. So how are they ever going to be charged with pollution issues if there's no quantifiable discharge that we can keep our track of? All we can see is Lake O discharges, but Lake O discharges are sugar discharges, are cattle discharges, are fertilizer discharges. There's a lot going on in there. So, all right. And then, so Scott says absolutely that they should be held responsible. Again, you can go to Open Secrets, check out, see what, you can go down there and Sierra put this up for us. So it's a great way to check out how you're being sold out. I mean, politicians, as we know, are supposed to be public servants. Now, the trick to that is that they don't get paid much. So it's very easy to bribe a local politician. I'm sure everybody's got a story about that. I'd love to hear it. Please add it in. So they're putting in millions of dollars to local politicians to say, okay, no problem. We're going to look the other way. Do your thing. We're going to blame it on the Army Corps. And the Army Corps is going to do these discharges, and they're going to put it out there. But why isn't U.S. Sugar held responsible for red tide? How come DeSantis's brain trust has never understood that pollution discharge is toxic exposure that creates a chain of events that creates more red tide? If we know the phosphorus feeds red tide through eutrophication, surely we can teach some of the scientists that he's hired, unless we're smarter than those scientists, which I doubt. But scientists, unfortunately, are another challenging part to the whole thing. So, and as Elizabeth says, definitely always follow the money, because if you follow the money, you're going to learn why policy is as it is. And policy, we have to remember, the problem with all this is it's legal. You're legally being poisoned. And we want to change that. We have to change that. So what can we do? This is really, really what's important. Who controls the water? Well, guess what? You have a lot of say, especially in Florida, unless they pass a bill they're trying to pass right now, which stops community signature initiative ballots on the ballot. So they want to try to stop putting out the ballots. So what do we do? Okay, well, there's a lot of politics going on in water management. First, you have federal versus state versus local. So you've got, the EPA, which has basically been run out of Florida. You've got the state of Florida. You got your legislature, your House, your Congress, guys like Ben Albritton that did the Surface Water Act or whatever that prevented people from suing for the local communities. Something that, again, the right to clean water is trying to fix. And you have your local decision-making power. You have your county commissioners, where everybody goes and has their voices heard at these meetings. Now the lobbyists are putting a lot of money in at the lowest level. Usually, here is the local guy that owns a deli, and yeah, like a $50,000 check to him. It's really good, and it's a fantastic way to do it. And we found when we were looking at Mosaic that the corruption is amazing. Mosaic pays off a little bit of money to every single politician in every single district that they discharge out. Now, why do they do that? So they look the other way. So there's no controls over the amounts that are going out. So if you have uncontrollable amounts going into Lake O, you've got all these lobbyists pushing their policy. You've got all these activists fighting for clean water. What do we do? It's a huge battle, and these politicians are not going to suddenly become altruistic. The only language that companies speak is money. They don't speak. We can't say, "Oh, we have cancer." Nobody cares. We can't say, "Oh, the environment." Nobody cares. DeSantis doesn't care. The companies don't care. And as Elizabeth says, who owns your local politicians, right? Like, it's very, very, very important to know, because that's how we make the change. So what can be done? Now, a couple of solutions that are non-political start with storing and treating the water south of the lake. Is there any way, and I'm curious to see what everybody thinks about this, is there any way that we can somehow treat this water and store it before it gets discharged? Have they tried it? Why don't they do it? It seems such a very simple and smart decision. So let's hear what you guys think about that. Why wouldn't they do that? Why don't they stop treating this lake as a lake and start treating it as what it is right now, which is a toxic soup that needs to be addressed before the water is discharged? If you're going to allow that much pollution into a natural resource that should be the people's resource, but you guys have destroyed that with the pollution. If you're going to do that, it must be cleaned before it goes out, or it should be cleaned at the source. And that is the more important solution, is making corporate responsibility and making them clean it before it leaves. The Clean Water Act should already have this standard. It's absolutely shocking why these discharges are allowed to happen. The pollution is allowed to happen at the rate it's happening. Even Brian Mast said it was happening and that it's toxic to people. Why is this allowed to be? Now, this is a big thing. Companies need to be held responsible. We believe, and I'm going to speak because Sierra and I talk about this a lot, the companies, okay, we have Citizens United, which is the craziest load of whatever you want to call it that's been across the laws in 50 years, where corporations are allowed to sue people because they want to be treated like people, but they don't share responsibility of people. I can't walk over to my neighbor's house and just pour poison into his water supply, his water tank. I would be charged. And so should these companies be, because that is exactly what they're doing. They're taking their pollution and they're passing it on, and everyone's paying the price, whether it's an economic failure because of red tide destroying people's lives in Sanibel, Venice, other areas, or it is, no matter what the attack is, we have to remember that it's our water and we can fight and we can bring it back. We have to get together right now, and we have to start demanding that these corporations and companies are responsible for their pollution. The pollution that they say they don't have, they don't do. So how do we do that? Now is the really good question. How do we do it? How do we make them more responsible? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. One idea that we believe that would be very important would just be simply strengthen the regulations and accountability for these companies. It's as simple as turning a tap off. I didn't have to get cancer, and if somebody would have forced a company that was not doing well by the environment to turn their pollution tap off, maybe I wouldn't have it. And it makes me angry every day because it's like a lifelong sentence I have because some company wanted to profit. I don't care about your company and I don't care about your profit. I care about my health. I care about people around me. I care about my neighborhood. I care about my neighbors. I care about every human, every animal, every inhabitant of this earth. But I don't care about your profit. So I feel like a lot of people feel that way too. So why are so many people so subservient to the concept of companies needing to make money? It's on them. If they are going to take the gamble to become a company, who cares? Like whatever, we don't profit if they profit, but why should we pay the price of their profit? Why should our health pay the tab of them getting to go buy an island? You get sick so somebody can go buy a boat. It should make you angry. And your politicians are doing this to more people in Florida than ever before. And we have to remember that cancer is a huge problem in Florida because of pollution, and Lake O is part of that. And everybody between Lake O and the Gulf also are getting toxic exposure from this. This is, it's just sometimes there's no words. I'm sorry. Like, I've just had immunotherapy again, and it just brings back the reality of what's going on and what's going on to so many people that we don't even know. Until we change it, more are going to get sick. Addison says, I'm angry. Wish more people were. And Addison, it's really, really inspirational to see somebody your age that has such a pulse, the finger on the pulse of what's happening in your area, whether it's politically, environmentally. It's amazing because we need people like you out there to continue to speak up. People like Elizabeth and Sierra and Stell and Scott. I mean, a lot of people that are on this show today are people that are out in the streets saying, no more, we're done with this. So let's bring back together our community. Let's reunify. Let's not let our color of our thinking affect what we need to do, which is to be thinking about the environment and thinking about your children, your grandchildren. And if you don't care about yourself, well, that's fine. A lot of adults say, well, whatever, I can smoke. It's up to me to die or whatever. Okay, you're an adult. Do your thing, but stop killing younger people. Stop killing children that are going to grow up around this environment. We have to do something. It has to be changed, and it has to be done soon. And people are out there. Like I said, we're doing it. So again, let's hold these polluters responsible. Let's strengthen our regulations and accountability. And let's look at ways to clean this water, whether it is at the source, which is the best way to do it. The polluters need to control their pollution. It's not up to us to control it after we have to absorb it. Scott says it's proven through Swift Mud that about 90% of the legacy nutrients originate and come from the northern watersheds, the Kissimmee Basin, Orlando. Only viable known scientific fix is to use, there it is, to use the Kissimmee chain and Lake Okeechobee as a gigantic pre-filter, using the only science available, allowing large spaces of aquatic plant, essentially invasive hydrilla. Then use the large-scale kelp and deep water hydrilla cutting harvesters to remove the sequestered legacy nutrients with the plants from of allowing aquatic species, hydrilla, then use the large-scale kelp and deep water hydrilla cutting harvesters to remove sequestered legacy nutrients with plants from, and I can't see the rest of the comment, but Oh, absolutely. And everybody, Scott has an amazing amount of knowledge on Lake O and what's happening to all of the spraying that's going on there. And, you know, we have a way, and I think Scott was just talking about there are natural ways to clean some of this water. And we should be looking at that instead of this concept of human management of natural resources, which, as we know, always leads to disaster. As Sierra says, BMPs are not enough. Clearly, look at where we are now, right? Why are we talking about this today? Still, like after the super bloom of 2018, you would have thought that everybody would have jumped over backwards to get this fixed. And instead, you just had some performative nothing happening from the government, I should say. From the activists, a different story. Elizabeth says, it's creepy and gross to put profits over people. That does not define a successful human. Exactly. And Florida has the ability, because you guys can put things on the ballot, you can bypass your government that has sold you out. You can bypass them by signing the right to clean water and supporting the right to clean water amendment that they want to put in. Again, it's the only solution we've seen because your rights are being taken. And, you know, we didn't know this, but in Florida, you do not have a constitutional right to clean water. Think about that. While we're talking about all this, remind yourself, you do not have a constitutional right to clean water. Now, everybody's trying to change that. You can sign and you can help change that. So let's see. What is the biggest roadblock to fixing Florida's water issues? Politics, money, or awareness? Curious to see what you guys think. What's the biggest roadblock to fixing Florida's water issues? Is it politics, money, or awareness? Because if we can understand these three, we can understand better how we can stop it. And again, we already discussed it. It's very easy to stop, right? Stop it at the source. It is the only solution. How do we do that? Let's keep together. Let's keep talking. This is why we have these talks. Let's hear some ideas. Let's talk about changes we can make. You know, there's a lot of amazing advocates out there right now fighting for clean water. Like I said, a lot of them are here on the show. A lot of them are not on the show right now, but we hope that they'll also chime in. We want to know more about what's happening out there. So we'd love to answer any questions that you guys have as well. And, you know, when it comes to Lake O, this is a very, very brief history of the Lake O pollution problem. It is way bigger than what we talked about today. And I highly encourage everybody to check out Capitals for Clean Water, check out the Water Keepers. Scott Wilson has a lot of information. Our friend Wilson McCourtney has a lot of information. Go to fightingforflorida.com and you can check out that documentary. He is getting ready to release it now. And it is a very important document. We need more documentaries about what's happening out here. We're proud to have added phosphate as a documentary about what's happening to Mosaic's phosphate mining in Florida, but that's only one piece of this huge toxic puzzle that we have here. So Addison says, I keep trying to make people more aware. When I do trash pickups, I try to take clean water petitions with me. Awesome, Addison. That is great. And good on you too for doing the trash pickups. That's so important. It's another thing that is a downriver solution. And we need an upriver solution. You know, people should be stopping pollution at the source. So thank you for being the downriver solution and helping keep our state clean. It's really important. And thank you for being out there in the field doing it and advocating for a better future at the same time. Carl says lack of awareness is our biggest hurdle. And Carl, you know, that is definitely something we're trying to work on with this documentary. We do have more screenings. By the way, everybody, if you are in the area, we're going to be in Venice, Sarasota at Fogartyville, which is going to be very exciting at the community center there. And we're going to be screening March 26th. Come on by. It's free. We want to talk to everybody about what's happening and how this mosaic piece of the toxic puzzle can be solved through corporate responsibility. Will it ever happen? It's hard to say, right? But it's something that I don't get it. Like when an election comes around, everybody talks about politicians like they're saints. And then but the reality is we all know that they're kind of useless and more roadblocks than help, which is why Carl's also pushing a lot to get the right to clean water out there. So Madison says 400 hours of picking up trash in 2024. That is amazing. Addison, as I think we've talked about, we would actually like to have you on as a guest coming up to talk to everybody about community engagement and how people can be more involved in their local communities. And that is amazing. 400 hours of picking up trash. Sierra and I would love to join, hopefully with you, Stell, and Elizabeth on one of your trash pickup days and come out there and join you and try to help, because I definitely did not do 400 hours, and I thank you so much for putting that extra effort in. That's incredible, and that's an inspiration to myself, and I know a lot of other people. Scott Wilson says, "Got to get back to the grind. Love and prayers, brother." Thank you, Scott, for being on today. One of the many important voices for Lake O that this state has right now. So again, let's talk about the ending. Let's talk again about solutions. We know what the problem is. We have seen the Lake O here. Let me bring this map up again because I'd like to share this with everybody and just remind everybody. Here we are. So I'm gonna put myself down there. Okay. So remember, this is right here in the middle. You've got cattle and citrus, which is all here, over 300,000 acres of fertilizer coming down into the water. You've got all these towns around dumping into the water. You've got them spraying toxic into the water. And the water that was supposed to have flowed through here to be cleaned by whatever natural toxins occurred before humans were around would naturally flow through here, down through the Everglades into, as they called it, the Florida Bay or whatever back then. So instead, now Okeechobee discharges here and discharges here. Well, not so much over here because of Brian Mast declaring that the water is so toxic, it's harmful to humans. So why allow it anywhere else, Brian Mast? Come on, man. Really, like, pick up the pace. If you're able to say that, say it for everybody. Here we go, everybody. You can go to Fogartyville here. Come check it out. Come join us. Meet us in person. Talk to us and talk more about some of these toxins. So again, for Lake O, such an important topic. And I want to thank everybody for being on the show today and participating in our show. There's so many aspects to keeping this water clean. Right now, red tide was so bad recently, I wasn't able to go to the beach with my lowered immunity. So, it's affecting everybody. And don't forget that they've discovered that the red tide also comes inland through the air. So that's newer knowledge, but even more dangerous knowledge. Why do we keep having super blooms since 2018? The reason has to do mostly with these discharges and with mosaics discharges out into the water systems, adding tons of phosphorus, which acts as a eutrophication, which is miracle grow again, miracle grow for red tide. And it's injuring a lot of industries, unfortunately. And you know what? It's so true. It's crazy to see people fishing in that water. It smells like poop. Ooh. I always try to stop and talk to them. I am surprised people know about all this pollution and will still fish there and eat it. And if you guys missed the last episode, we talked about the fact that a lot of these lakes are stocked. They're stocked by the Fish and Wildlife Management. Now, where are the fisheries? They're in Tenorock, which is a reclaimed land of a phosphate mine that's filled with radiation. So automatically the fisheries are radiated. Then they're going out into these toxic soups. It's really, really gross. And that's a great question, Elizabeth. Was Mast trying to push into the poor areas? That is a great question. That is usually what we see with environmental justice issues. They will try to pollute into the areas they consider areas that can't fight back, as opposed to the richer areas. So, Beverly Hills is not having any environmental issues in California. you know, so yeah, it's by design. It's by design. So what do we do about Lake O? Well, one thing that we can do, again, go back to the right to clean water. Sign that petition if you're in Florida. It will get it on the ballot. And if it goes onto the ballot, it allows the voters to have a say and to try to preempt this type of pollution that creates things like my environmental cancer and other people's cancers, chronic illnesses. There's so much that comes out of it. Kidney failure, a lot of that happens a lot. Actually, that is a side effect of excessive phosphates in the water as well. So that's another kind of issue. So we need to hold these companies responsible. It's not that hard. I don't see why anybody would be against that. And the only way to do that is to be there at your local meetings, to be at your local county commissioner meetings, to have your voice heard, to be like Addison and be out there talking to people, engaging people, discussing it with people. Why is this happening? Are you worried that your fish comes from poo-smelling water? You'd think that they'd already be worried, but unfortunately, people tend to allow a lot. We tend to excuse a lot. And a lot of our excusing these things has now led to toxic soup, the toxic puzzle. And the toxic soup is in the middle of the state, but it's ported out directly to you all. And as Elizabeth says, call your Florida rep in the area you vacation and tell them to support the right to clean water. That's another important thing. Where's your vacation house? If you don't live in Florida, your second house, where is it? It's very, very important. And these local politicians are very active. So there's a lot, and they have a lot that they're just climbing their ladder, politician ladder. So they have a lot at stake, and they try to listen to their people a lot more. So there's a lot of ways that you can affect it. Remember, you have a voice, you have a vote, you have a say. We are not victims. We're not powerless in this. This has just been simply allowing politics to go on as is way too long. And it's time to change that. And people are speaking up. So it's fantastic. There's a lot of great changes going. So Lake O, it's a long time problem with a long time problematic solution and a lot of people working on it. So let's keep talking about it. What other ideas can we have? And how do you think we can make these corporations responsible for the pollution that they're adding to Lake O that's being piped directly to your town? What do you think? And let's talk about keeping them responsible. So very excited. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. There is so many topics to talk about. And I see Julie's here. Hey, Julie, thanks for joining. And Julie's another amazing environmental activist. And Julie says, we must change. Absolutely. It's easy to do. Too many of us are sick to not at this point. Probably more of us are sick than healthy. So we have to make that change around. And yes, as Carl says, we elect those that hopefully think like us, but they bring no change as the corporate headwinds are too big for them to be effective. And that is a big problem. So much corruption, so much money in politics. Everybody knows lobbying is no good. Special interest is no good. The developers are a problem here. That's another issue with Lake O. They could fix it more if they didn't have all those communities right there, all the overdevelopment. So like I said, Lake O is a small version of Florida the state. The problems, the beauty, the potential, and the fact that there's still solutions and ways to fix it. So very excited. Thank you, everybody, again for joining us. Please join us next week. We're going to be back on Wednesday, 10:30 a.m. And we're going to be talking about more of these water issues because remember, all the water is connected. All the water is around. And next week is a very exciting one. Next week is Big Sugar. So join us as we talk about U.S. sugar, Big Sugar, and information that comes from a lot from Bull Sugar, one of the groups that was really one of the first to stand up and fight against it. Which before we leave out this show, we'd like to just take a moment of silence for our friend Kenny Hinkle Jr., who we lost this week, who was an incredible Florida advocate. And it's a terrible loss. And I know everybody in the community is very upset, as well as Sierra and I, who knew Kenny and knew his work, and looked up to what he was doing. And yeah, amazing advocate. So let's keep moving forward. Let's keep talking about solutions. This is the only thing we can do. Let's talk about solutions. Join us next week. I'm very excited. Next week, Big Sugar. What can we do? Let's get this water cleaned up. Thanks everybody for joining. Have a great week, and we'll see you next.